Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. You're watching Obi and Horn of Africa. This is Future Africa Show. I am your host and producer, Addis Asafa. In this edition today, we're going to discuss about the move which is being imposed by the Westerners, the West imperialists in the continent of Africa and in Ethiopia these days. Africans should say no to this new branded neocolonialism. And I joined by an author of See Africa with the Eyes of the Future, Sebastien Perimony from Paris via Zoom. Sebastien Perimony, good to join me.
Thank you. Hello to everybody, and thank you for having me today. I'm also a member of the Schiller Institute, the International Schiller Institute, member of the Africa desk.
All right. Okay. You've been doing a lot of jobs on neocolonialism and the way in which Africans should say no to the modern way of colonialism. And among others, you have written and published a book entitled See Africa with the Eyes of the Future. And could you tell us the synopsis of the story and the synopsis of your book in short, before going to deep into our dialogue today?
Okay, thank you. The subject of the book is about the goal for Africa to end the last 15 years of imperial policy imposed by the Western so-called democracy, the United States of America, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, and everything starts, and it's very important for our viewer to understand that everything starts, the 15th of August, 1971, when Nixon pulled the plug on the financial system to re-establish a world financial oligarchy, a world financial system with the Wall Street, the City of London, with the World Bank, with the IMF, to control the world and to impose imperial policy, austerity policy, non-development policy all around the world. So the book is to say that we have to stop with these 15 years of imperial policy, financial neocolonialism, and start to see Africa with the eyes of the future. As I say, it means to have this great infrastructural project, and Ethiopia is one of the cases I'm speaking in my book, the Great Dam, the high-speed train between Djibouti and Addis Ababa, the industrial zone, and so on and so forth, which is a very good example. It's a very good example for all the continent to see that Ethiopia is becoming now an industrial country. So my book is about space policy. You know that Ethiopia has a space program, and in part with France. When Macron was there, he signed a cooperation on space policy with Ethiopian governments. It's about high-speed trade. It's about the Agenda 2063 to connect all the capital of all the country of Africa by high-speed train. It's about nuclear energy that now you have more than 10 countries in Africa who are developing their nuclear program, to have civil nuclear program. So my book is trying to show another picture of the continent when it will be fully industrialized, when the continent will be fully developed, and that everybody will have electricity, water, medicine, healthcare system, and so on and so forth. So it's trying to stop, this idea that the continent of Africa is poor. You have wars, famine all the time. They are not because it is the African continent, but famine, wars, conflict, and so on and so forth has been implemented, created almost all the time by the European continent, the British, and the imperial American policy. So my book is about all this to start a new paradigm in the continent.
Okay, you've discussed in your book about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, right? And all the political baggage that we are witnessing in Ethiopia these days is one way or another related to this Grand Continental project. And what did you discuss in your book in relation to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam?
But because what is needed in Africa is electricity. Everybody knows that, You have one of our former ministers in France, Jean-François Borloo, who launched an initiative, it was 5 or 6 years ago, say power to Africa. We have discovered that Africa needs electricity. So, but it's funny because everybody needs electricity. So, but this project just fall apart. So, of course, this is one of the main projects today in Africa, the Great Dam, of course. But as we are in a geopolitical situation, you have the West, the imperial policy of the US and the European Union and British trying to use this Great Dam project to destabilize the entire region. So they are using Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, one against each other, using faction there, who are against project. But who can be against a project which bring electricity, not only for the Ethiopian people who needs it, but also for Sudan, for Ethiopia, for Egypt, for all the region. Even South Africa is interesting to have, electricity from Ethiopia now. So the real problem with this Great Dam is that you have this imperial policy which have for the last 50 years imposed a non-development policy, who have stopped all the big projects that the continent was wanted to do. And Ethiopia is one of the main factors now in this renaissance, in this revolution, industrial revolution now in the continent. That's why it's a big problem for the oligarchy and the financial institution to see that African countries are now ready to fully develop by industrial policy.
The US is playing its usual hypocrisy in Ethiopian current affairs and intervening in Ethiopian internal affairs these days. And again, the US is pro-Egypt when it comes to the GERD politics, right? Always US is there whenever a threat is there for a legitimate government. The GERD is its agenda of controversy between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. And the US keenly favoring Egypt and Sudan. Why they became against this grand continental project?
You know, the policy of an empire is divide and conquer. So it always be that. But you have to see the Ethiopian problem in a larger, in a global picture. We have to be straight, you know. Now, the United States of America, the British, and the European Union are no more Republican country. They are dictatorship, okay? And they want to impose their policy all around the world. For now, you know, you have the Secretary of State, Blinken, in the US, who are intervening all around the world. For example, he decided to start a war with China 2 days ago. You have meeting in the ASEAN country, and Blinken came in saying that the worst danger in the world now is China, and we have to maybe use nuclear strike to have nuclear war, you know, against China. So we are in this kind of situation, and we have to see the conflict in Ethiopia in this global picture. We are now in a world war situation. Why? Because the financial system of the West is doomed, is bankruptcy, is in bankruptcy totally, and it cannot be saved. So now they are using this China policy against China policy to have wars in the country, against the country. So we have to be clear. It's a very, very dangerous situation all around the world. And Ethiopia is a collateral damage, as we say, in this global fight to save the financial empire of the US, the European Union, and the British. That I think the global picture we have to see to understand what is going on now in the African continent, and particularly in this region between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia.
Okay, how do you see the very voracious move of the United States of America and the European Union in intervening in Ethiopia's sovereign affairs these days?
Yes, the West is clear. As I say, you know, we want to impose a free, so-called free market economy, which is not working. Everybody knows that with the World Bank, the IMF policy for years. But they are pushing and trying to intervene in internal Ethiopian affairs by asking privatization, for example, privatization of the telecommunication system. They are pushing that with the World Bank, saying that if you do it, we will give you $9 billion, which is just amazing, $9 billion to Ethiopia if you privatize everything, which is what the West is calling now in Ethiopia. So I think the government, we have done a very good job, in industrializing the country, as to reject this policy very clearly and not working. I think, as I say, always I say, is that if you want to develop a country, kick Wall Street, the City of London, the World Bank, and the IMF out of your country, and then you will be able to have a real good development policy.
The Western imperialists is still bargaining in Ethiopian internal affairs, as I have said a while ago. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia never gave a fig for their very hypocritical way of manipulation. They did aid cuts on some stuff, and they did again this visa restriction. Still, they are trying to challenge by refraining themselves from giving aid and other stuffs, right? How did you see the move which is undergone by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the incumbent government?
I think he has to resist, of course, and don't cut his tie with China, for example, because I know everybody knows why some countries in Africa are now very attacked by the US policy. Is that because now they want to work with China or with Russia on nuclear energy or with other partners in the world, and that in some way the West are losing its continent, its Africa, So they are trying to push different presidents to cut ties with China, and I think what China has done in Ethiopia was very good. I think the train and a lot of projects, and the West is trying to push, and I want to be clear, they will not stop to try to destabilize what the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has done. All the great job he has done with the Great Dam, with the industrialization policy. He was a Nobel Prize, trying to reduce conflict in the region. They will try to destroy it, as they have destroyed, they have destroyed Afghanistan, they have destroyed Iraq, they have destroyed Libya, Syria. The country are totally chaotic now, and they will oppose, even by war, using minority to destabilize your government. But I think the main thing is to be clear that they will not stop to try to destabilize the country and be, strong in your feet, as we say in France, to keep on moving and see the Ethiopian country with the eyes of the future and go on this policy of development, industrialization for the country and the region.
Okay, what is expected from the Ethiopian government and general public of Ethiopia in resisting the ongoing imperialists' way of infiltrating in Ethiopian case, mostly by the US and the European Union?
Yeah, so you have to inform people, is what you are doing. And it's very important that we have this kind of discussion for the Ethiopian people, because, and one thing which is good also is that everybody know now, the imperial policy of the US and the European Union. That's why after the financial collapse of 2008, remember, you have the creation of the BRICS nation, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now you have the Belt and Road Initiative pushed by China to develop infrastructural projects in the world. So you have a new paradigm already emerging from the collapse of the imperial power of the West. And I think Ethiopia have done a good job now and have to go on, and the population is supporting it, to go is this new paradigm of development, mutual development, win-win cooperation, industrialization. And I think the people have to go this way, because we know, and everybody know now, that the imperial policy will not stop. They will use, the national endowment for democracy, trying to make color revolution. For example, use just a case of today. Yesterday, Blinken, the Secretary of State of the US, and the European Union said that they will finance a coup d'etat in Belarus, because Belarus is wanted to work with Russia and China and not with the European Union. So they say we will finance the opposition as they do in Ukraine, you know, a few years ago, to destabilize a country totally and faire a coup d'etat, to destabilize the country. So this is in what we are in today. They are trying to push coup d'etat all around the world to keep the control of their doomed system, but their system is totally failed today.
Western media have never uttered any positive move that had been undergone by the new administration in Ethiopia about the humanitarian crisis in Tigray these days, right? It's really funny and paradox. Why they kept silent while all the move and while all those changes, reforms being undergone in Ethiopia, and now crying and yelling about the humanitarian crisis that is happening in Tigray regional state. And for about 27 years, Ethiopians have been entertaining so many tragedies and so many cruel things have been happening in Ethiopia. And those days, we have never heard about the humanitarian crisis. During the TPLF regime, people were buried alive in jail Ogaden. They have massacred, perpetrated, assassins, you can name it, right? These days, they are yelling about the humanitarian crisis in Tigray to infiltrate that way and doing their stuff behind the rebels and trying to go to the level of regime change, which is very funny. And what is your analysis about this?
Yeah, you are totally right. That's why I say that you not only you have to kick the IMF, the World Bank, and all these people, but also all the NGO you have in your country. USAID, you know, is controlled by the CIA. All these NGOs are in country. You know, it was the same case in Libya, for example, or in Syria. We are so-called doing now humanitarian intervention. What is humanitarian intervention? It's the one of the aspects of these imperial policies that we're saying, oh, look, you have 2 or 3 people who are suffering here. And so we will destabilize the government, as we do in Libya and Syria, using humanitarian, you know, so-called propaganda to destabilize the government. So it's a new way of wars, you know, and they are using always this humanitarian issue. Look at what China is the same. They are using the problem with the Uyghur in Tibet and so on and so forth, using a minority to destabilize a country where a president was largely elected democratically, and even that, we are trying to destabilize it.
In your works, you always resist the move of neocolonialism, right? And you've been doing different works with that of Lawrence Freeman, the well-known political economic analyst from the US. And how do you see this new brand of colonialism, which is neocolonialism these days in Africa?
But it's very dangerous. I think it's not a new colonialism. It's that, as I say, you have a world financial system which is collapsing, and you have this oligarchy, this financial oligarchy ready to destabilize the entire world, not only the African continent. That's why you have this narrative against China, trying to launch a war against China, trying to launch a war against Russia, trying to have regime change in the eastern country of Europe, and of course, in Latin America, and finally also in all the African continent. So I'm totally agree with what Larry Freeman was saying on your last TV show. He was totally right on this new neo-colonial policy. But for me, it's not new as such, you know. It's just a new phases of the imperial power which is collapsing and trying to avoid this own collapse by destroying the world and pushing war all around the world, as we have seen in the Middle East, as we have seen China, and how we are seen in Ethiopia now.
The Westerners always grant or give aid to Africans in the presence of camera light and manipulate the continent in the dark. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
their aid is a tool for manipulation and exploitation, whatever. How do you see this move, and how do you see this bad act?
You know, that's the first part of my book against this NGO association and all this so-called aid development. Since the 1971, as I said, we have implemented the so-called aid development policy for the South, but which has never working. And the president of Ghana was clear when he met with our president in France, Emmanuel Macron. He said that aid development has never worked, will never, is not working, and will never work. Never, never, never. So what I say in the first part of my book is that the African continent is what we can call American revolution, in a sense, when the American, at the beginning, the founding father of the US, the United States of America, kicked the British imperialists, the British Empire, out of their country and developed a national banking system issuing credits to develop their industrial policy, which was forbidden at the time and still forbidden today for the African continent. So almost no country in Africa has a national banking system to issue credit to promote its own development. So they are dependent in a sense of the foreign direct investment, which is also another joke, foreign direct investment. So why not a nation state as Ethiopia, as Ghana, as Nigeria, has not the means, to have a national banking system as we had that in France after the Second World War. Now it's no more the case because we have the euro, which is controlled by private bankers. But at the time, we have a national banking system, and we were issuing our own credit, saying we will build this railroad, we will build the nuclear power plant, we will have a space program, we will develop a health system, very modern. So I think the fundamental issue for the continent now, not in 10 years, in 20 years, now, it's to go back to nation states with a national banking system to issue credit for their own industrial development, as Ethiopia is doing a little bit with this electricity program, high-speed program, which is a good example. A good example with Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria is going in this direction. And I think it is the most important issue. We have to stop to see the aid development as something good. It's just amazing. I was in Ivory Coast 2 weeks ago, and in the university, I made a conference, and people are studying financing by UNESCO. Are studying how they will make aid development in their own country. So it's just amazing. And they have a degree for that. So it's just funny. Why not have a program for real development, physical development? It's just a joke, and we have to stop all this nonsense, this propaganda about aid development. It has never worked, and it will never work. It's just an imperial control of the continent by the IMF and the World Bank.
Okay, Africa is fragmented due to different reasons, and Africa is not having a common virtue, and you can't define Africa as a single continent which has its own virtue, identity, whatever, tradition, you name it, right? What has to be done to bring a unique identity, and what has to be done to build a United Kingdom of Africa?
Ethiopia was a founding father, let's say, of the African Union at the time, with Kwame Nkrumah, all these great leaders who have been almost all assassinated at the time or kicked out. But Ethiopia was at the center of this project of a real Pan-Africanist, vision of the African and the development of the continent. You have also at the time the non-allied movement fighting for the own development. All these people were connected together. But I think, is what I am discussing in my book, that the program of the African Union, even if it's not perfect, I mean the so-called free trade agreement for Africa, I don't think it's a good thing. But physical economy, industrial policy to connect the continent is very good. And the Agenda 2063, you have a lot of very interesting things inside. As I say, connected all the capitals in Africa by high-speed trade. Already, if you do that, you will have an integrated network of industrial development and movement for people and so on and so forth. And we will have, you will create let's say a Pan-African culture with industrial and infrastructural development. So I think that's the basis to go back to these ideals of the Pan-Africanists of the 60s who had already this idea, and that's why they have been stopped at the time.
Okay, what has to be done by African leaders and African people to combat the ongoing neocolonialism these days? And what do you urge general nation of the continent and leaders of different countries in the continent?
Yes, already I call people to participate to our conference, because we have a conference with the Schiller Institute on Saturday, 3 o'clock Paris time. And you will have people from China, Russia, United States, all around the world, to define a new paradigm, to stop, as I said at the beginning of this interview, to stop the paradigm which was launched the 15th of August, 1971, who imposed a financial imperialism. So now with the Belt and Road Initiative, with the cooperation between Russia and China, with a lot of presidents in Africa, as the president of Ethiopia, the president of Ghana, the president of Kenya. You have a lot of leaders now who want to develop the continent. And I think it's time, and I call the people to join this conference, because we will discuss a new world financial system based on what we develop today: industrial policy, win-win cooperation, mutual development, industrialization, all these projects. And you have so many projects in Africa. It's just unbelievable, So I urge people to participate to this conference. You can go on schillerinstitute.org if you want to know more about this conference. And you will have people from all over the world fighting this financial empire, fighting this financial neo-colonialism, which is not only in Africa, but everywhere in the world today, even in France, with the policy of our presidents. So you have a resistance, you have a real opposition now in the world. And I invite everybody to join this conference and the Schiller Institute to participate and succeed to kill this oligarchy finally.
Sebastien Perimony, author of See African with the Eyes of the Future. Thank you once again for joining me from Paris via Zoom. And thank you for your worthwhile analysis and insight on the ongoing neocolonialism. Bye. See you next time with another topic. Have a good one. Take care, Sebastien.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure, sir.
And hello to all the Ethiopians.
Dear viewers, you've been watching our edition for today, which revolves around neocolonialism and the imperialist activity in Africa and in Ethiopia as well. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. See you next time with another edition.